Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30, and I'll call to order this November 28th, 2023 meeting of Lancaster City Council. A few notes for the meeting this evening. It is being recorded, so all of its participants are also being recorded. Please take a moment now to silence your phones if you haven't done so already. For anyone who will be addressing council or making public comment this evening, please do so at the microphone right here at the podium so you can be heard both in the room and on the recording. Please always begin your comments with your name and block of residence for the meeting record. And public comments are limited to no longer than 3 minutes per speaker per topic. To make sure that each speaker gets an equal amount of time and also so that I do not have to speak over anyone, when their time is up, I will use this timer here in front of me. It will be set for 3 minutes. The light will be green and then will turn to yellow when you have 1 minute remaining, and it will turn red when 3 minutes is up. Thank you to everybody in advance for making sure that everyone gets the same amount of time. And now for anyone who is willing and able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Harris, would you please call the roll of members?
Yes, Madam President. Mr. Med.
Here.
Mr. Arroyo.
Here.
Mr. Cleese.
Here.
Ms. Craig.
Here.
Ms. Diaz. Ms. Walsh.
Here.
And President Baker.
Here. Councilor Diaz is excused for the meeting this evening. Our next item is the approval of minutes for the November 14th, 2023 meeting of council.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the meeting minutes. Any councilor comments on them? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Med.
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
And President Baker.
Aye. Our next item on the agenda is proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. Mr. Harris, do we have any of those this evening?
We do not, Madam President.
Thank you. That will take us to our first public comment period. This is reserved for residents who have contacted the city clerk prior to tonight's meeting to request the opportunity to address city council. Again, duration of comments is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and please begin with your name and block of residence for our record. Mr. Harris, do we have public comment this evening?
We do. First, we have Dave Castorella.
Good evening, Mr. Castorella.
Good evening. We're on. Dave Castorella, 900 block of First Street, Lancaster. Thank you for your time again. I know you are all beautiful human beings. I see it in you, and this is why I'm talking. I know there's problems getting the shelters open in the space. Instead of blame or finding out who's at fault, what I would really love to see is everybody, the county commissioners, the homeless coalition, you people, the mayor, the city, sitting down at one table, getting rid of the politics, and let's figure out how to do something substantial, long-term, and extremely helpful to the people, and not fight about this, figure out how to do this. Some of the things you aren't, I don't want to say capable of, but knowledgeable of, that so many people work with the homeless hands-on are so capable of and can direct you when we all work together, and we can do something extremely beautiful. And I think if we just sit down together instead of finding out who's at fault or who's not doing their job, so many things will happen better. And right now, I don't know about tonight, but as of last night, there were about 30 people sleeping down the Binns Park area. The cleaner that works for the Hands Up Partners down there, he's doing an amazing job. He's cleaning the porta potties, making sure they're intact. He's breaking up fights over blankets, calling me when they need more stuff. we can manage this where they are if we have permission and if we have just a little bit of backup. And I will be honored to help get it going. I do know how to do this to a certain extent, but I would need reinforcement. Colleton Park, we just had a Zoom meeting today, and they said, won't Binns Park look at what we're doing and learn from that? I said, not by anything I've noticed, but they should, and if anybody can help, we'd be so grateful for it. And thank you for your time, and whatever you have to do is your business after here. I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costrello. Mr. Harris, are there further public comments this evening?
Yes, Madam President. Next is Susie Gomez.
I don't see Ms. Gomez in the room currently. If she is here during the second period, I will invite her to speak then. Are there any additional public comments, Mr. Harris?
There are not, Madam President.
Great. Thank you. This will take us into reports requested by council, and I believe that there's two on our agenda this evening. The first one is a review of the agreement with Immobile Commercial, I can never say it right, for 227 West James Street. Director Delfs, you'll be speaking to that this evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Commercial, is that the right way to say it? No.
I think that sounds right to me.
Okay, that sounds good. Los Lombardo's property.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again. As Council President alluded to, at the City Council meeting on September 12th, the Council voted to demolish the building at 227 West James Street, subject to several conditions. And the last of those conditions stated that the applicant will enter into a developer's agreement to be drafted and then reviewed by City Council prior to issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. If you'll remember, this was connected to the Heritage Conservation District and the required action there. I did bring the developer's agreement with me. I know that that was provided to the city councilors in advance by Mr. Harris. It's a 3-page agreement with a lot of dense language. I'm not going to go through all the text, but I will provide a brief synopsis tonight, and I welcome any questions that you might have. If you look at page 1, it starts with the now therefore, and after that section, there are a series of items that are required as part of the agreement. I think it's fair to say that numbers 1 through 6 primarily address that the developer must assume all costs and other related responsibilities related to the demolition of the said building at 227 West James. If you look at item number 7, this primarily addresses the subject of the conversation that we had on September 12th. It says here that the city and developer agree to the following terms and conditions, and there are 4 items or 4 parts listed under item 7. I just wanted to call out a couple of those for you because I think they were the most relevant to previous conversation. The first is part 7B. It says here that the developer will construct and maintain a public community herb and sculpture garden on the footprint of the main portion of the former Roseman House at the sole cost and expense of the developer. And then there are some additional conditions listed under Part 7B. Also wanted to note that Part 7D states that the developer shall include a notation in the recorded consolidated deed for the project and on the approved recorded land development plan for the project, stating that the garden shall 1, be located on the footprint of the main portion of the former Roseman House. Number 2, be a covenant running with the land. And 3, shall continue in perpetuity unless the garden use is terminated in writing by the city. So that addressed some of the concerns and questions of the council members about making sure that that commitment was fully established in law and would run in perpetuity. Beyond Item number 7, we have items number 8 through 14. These are primarily standard legal language related to the obligations of the agreement itself. And I think it's just worth noting that after that meeting on the 12th, city staff and our solicitor's office spent time in negotiating some of the language back and forth with the applicant's team. That was a very easy and successful process. I think that we've noted all the needed elements in the developer's agreement and are planning to move forward at this point. This is a draft final agreement. We have not yet asked the mayor to sign and execute it because the condition stated that we're here for your review. So hopefully we've accomplished that here tonight, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Director Dels, thank you so much. One question for you regarding, as it's item 7, item A.
Yes.
The formal parking plan with neighbors in the 200 block of West James Street. Do you know if there's been anything moving along with that? I know that was something that the neighbors wanted, that the developers were very eager to also put in place. Do you know about the status of that at all?
Yep, it's a good question. I did inquire about that particular item 7A, and I know there has been regular contact between Mr. Lombardo and the neighbors in furtherance of that agreement. I don't think a formal agreement has yet been completed because we were waiting for the execution of this developer's agreement.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council on the agreement? Councilor Ahmed?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Director Delves. My first question was regarding the capital improvements that the developer has agreed to make throughout the existence of this garden and everything. How is the city going to be able to enforce, that these improvements are happening, or is this just in good faith that the developer will make sure that the land is maintained and capital improvements will be happening?
That was the intent of this developer's agreement, and when we discussed the condition of the certificate of appropriateness, that was the main reason why we decided to memorialize it through this agreement, so we can rely upon this if needed.
So in a hypothetical situation, if they just kind of let it go and it kind of turns into an eyesore, what tools would the city have?
I would have to consult with our solicitor to be sure the variety of tools, but we do, through our land development process, in any situation that we have a developer's agreement, we can then bring the force of that agreement into effect. If you'd like more information from our solicitor about the mechanics of how that would happen, I'm happy to inquire about that as well.
Thank you. And my final question was regarding the public art. It says either on a temporary rotating basis or a permanent basis. How is that going to be decided if it's permanent or if it's going to be a temporary rotating basis? And if it is a temporary rotating basis, is that going to be permanent?
Yep, thank you for the question. The discussion that we've had so far, the way that it is framed here in item 7C is that the developer shall work with the city's public art and urban design program to develop a plan and to make those decisions. There's already been some informal conversation about the pros and cons of whether a rotating exhibit would be good versus a permanent one, but ultimately that will be in coordination with our public art manager and ultimately brought before the Public Art Advisory Board as well.
Thank you. And that concludes my questions, Council President.
Thank you, Councilor Ahmed. Councilor Walsh?
Council President, thank you. And thank you, Director Delves, for pulling this together. I know this was maybe out of the ordinary for what happens for some of these approvals, but I do appreciate your team and the property owner for sitting down and being able to pull this together to find something of a compromise. One of the issues I have a question with was number 7BI, obtaining all necessary permits and approval for the garden, including but not limited to a special exception to the zoning code for the use of the site as a public garden. What happens if that goes before zoning and they do not grant the exception or grant the zoning?
That special exception has been granted by the Zoning Hearing Board.
Okay. Yes. Okay, great. That answers that question. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Any other questions from council on the report? Councilor Kleist?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director Delph, for the presentation. I was wondering, I don't see any room for the city to take legal action from against the developer. So, because it's said here in the agreement that the city cannot change or modify the agreement without the consent of the developer. So, can the city take legal actions or seek legal actions against the developer if the developer refuses to comply with the conditions listed in the agreement?
We can indeed. Mr. Davis is here he's the counsel who represents the applicant. He also has worked on a number of different land developments here in the city and other municipalities in the county. Perhaps, would you like to speak to that? Just how that works in general.
Good evening. Mike Davis from Barley Snyder. With this agreement, once it is fully executed by both parties, it's fully enforceable by the city. So in other words, all the different conditions that are in there that indicate steps that the developer shall take if for some reason, and this is not going to happen because my client is going to fully perform, but if there was an instance where there would be a provision that wasn't fully complied with, the city would have the ability to basically bring an action as a breach of contract underneath of this agreement to enforce those terms.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
No further questions.
Thank you, Councilor Kleist. Any further questions from council? All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Director Delph, for bringing this to us and for putting this together. As Councilor Walsh stated, this is probably not a typical one, but we appreciate the work that you and your team have done.
It was a little unusual, but I'm glad that we spent the extra time on it to make sure we got the right result. So I appreciate all your patience.
Thank you for bringing it to us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, our next report requested by council will be a review of ARPA allocation extension request for the provision of homelessness services, as I'm reading off the agenda. So we'll be hearing tonight from Justin Eby and Deb Jones. And just, I appreciate you coming up to the podium. I just have a quick sort of to set the table and kind of set the scene of what we're talking about here this evening. I want to thank both of you for being here this evening and coming here tonight to provide this report to council. To give some background, the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority oversees the Homelessness Coalition, which is the designated lead agency responsible for the oversight of the continuum of care for those experiencing homelessness in Lancaster County. Their mission states that the coalition, quote, ensures homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. As you all may recall, in April of 2023, the city and the county Housing Redevelopment Authority entered into an agreement to open an additional 40 low-barrier shelter beds in the city, funded by city ARPA dollars. The county put out an RFP to operate an additional shelter at Otterbein United Methodist Church, but was not successful in receiving proposals. As such, the deadline set in the agreement of December 1st will not be met. Mr. Eby has submitted in writing a request for an extension, and I have asked him to come here this evening to discuss efforts to maintain the current 40 shelter beds, their budget for that shelter, the proposed budget for 40 additional beds, and efforts to find a provider. This topic is extremely important. We have seen an increase of people experiencing homelessness in our community. Our only low-barrier shelter in the entire county is at capacity nightly. In years past, the city of Lancaster received a relatively small amount of money through emergency service grants that we would pass along to the Homelessness Coalition as the lead agency. We have not received that funding for 3 years. The American Rescue Act funds gave us an opportunity that we may never have again to directly impact homelessness services and shelter capacity in our city. In fact, in the city, through the work of this council, we directed nearly 25% of our American Rescue Plan funds for affordable housing overall. The county gave about 5% of their share. Just this week, county commissioners outlined a 2024 budget that again provided no additional funding for homelessness services. It was reported in LNP this morning that the county earned $9.5 billion in interest on investments this year. Yet their spending on services remains flat, and the need for funds is increasing every year. We are at a critical moment, and I am eager to hear from Mr. Eby regarding the progress toward the goals outlined in our agreement that we made 7 months ago, and how he anticipates accomplishing it within this budget. Mr. Eby, thank you.
Good evening. All right. Good evening. Thank you, Council President, councilors, members of the public. Appreciate the time. Just looking back, and appreciate the overview that you gave, as well as our organization and Homelessness Coalition. The Redevelopment Authority is a county agency. We have operated in all 60 municipalities, 59 and one invited in the city of Lancaster. The Homelessness Coalition came to the Redevelopment Authority started in December of 2021. It was fully established in April of 2022. At that time, we established our baseline, staffed up, continued contracts, continued services, reviewed existing, assumed the lease at Ebenezer with the low barrier shelter, and continued to look at the winter months and the need for additional shelter. So this effort has been ongoing more than just over the last couple of months. This is something that we've been doing, working hard, trying to establish. The city has a lot of services. It has the greatest number of unsheltered individuals, and that is evident by our PIT count that was done in February of this year. And so we are also disappointed that we do not have additional beds at this point. It's a very long, drawn-out process that we continue to look at options and address on a day-to-day basis. Again, the agreement to utilize ARPA is a one-time opportunity. We don't want to put a Band-Aid on the situation, but we really want to make a great impact within the homeless system throughout the whole county. And so as we look at Columbia and Ephrata and Elizabethtown and some of the other areas that have other populations of unhoused and have other shelter operations, we want to make sure that collectively the county as a whole can respond to the increase of 11% of unsheltered over last year. And we don't see these numbers going any lower anytime soon. The housing supply, the housing choice, the availability of moving people out of shelter is the reason why we need more shelter space. And so we're looking at a multi-pronged approach, both here in the city and in the county, of providing both shelter space, but also connections and services. Homelessness is a complex issue, mental health, drug and substance use, as well as familial issues. And, again, as we address and look, I think we have a unique opportunity here in the city and across the county to have creative solutions, creative projects, and funding such as the ARPA is imperative. So that's kind of an overview of generally of what we're looking to do. And again, going back to October of last year, we knew there was a need for additional shelter space. We looked at multiple sites starting at that point, including the old UPMC Regional Hospital. Unfortunately, we ended up having to do a couple pop-up shelters last year, which we were trying to avoid this year. Again, making sure that our most vulnerable and unhoused have a warm, safe place, especially with temperatures going down, as we see this week. Additionally, when we're looking at space, we're looking at zoning and codes, and we're looking at overall budget. We can put a Band-Aid on this, but we really want to make a big impact and have projects that are sustained, but also permanent. That we have a place or two or three in the city, both to connect to services, provide family support, but then also have the low barrier needs that we're currently seeing, especially with the other issues of homelessness that I just discussed. So as we have established this agreement, and we can go through the report, but I think there's opportunity to answer a lot of the questions, since this is a public report, that things have even changed in the last 2 weeks as well, since we've had to temporarily relocate. We also have a great opportunity for the winter months to expand upon negotiations with landowners of where the temporary shelter is now, as well as the providers that are providing the services. So I think this is an ongoing dialogue that we need to have, both with the Homelessness Coalition, the Redevelopment Authority, and City Council, because there are going to be some questions and some details that may not be fine-tuned at this moment, that could be fine-tuned next week or the following week, especially as we look at Code Blue and look at winter shelter and making sure that we have the capacity. Last year, again, we increased 40 beds. We had 40 people fill those beds. So we are alongside of you on this issue. We've developed great relationship with city staff in addressing this issue. We've documented about 21 different sites. Those sites range from, like I said, the UPMC hospital all the way back in September, October last year, to a public-private partnership in potentially acquiring but being denied an offer to purchase a property, which would have gotten us to this December deadline. That public-private partnership looked at a few other properties as well. Additionally, we looked at the Benjamin Roberts property back last December, but it was occupied. Now we have opportunity for a temporary solution moving forward as well. The list goes on and on. Each property has various elements that need to be addressed. One, what is the overall budget to get it up to code? And two, zoning. And again, these are not generally issues just for the city. These are issues throughout our community, throughout every municipality, of having permanent shelter space and having the appropriate services and facility to house those. And so I just wanted to bring that to light in the report as well, as it is a complex issue. We are disappointed as well that we can't come today and say we have 40 extra beds. We're working very diligently and have meetings, continuing going on with city staff to make sure that we can get these legal agreements, leases, and other permanent fixtures in place. And so an example of things ongoing is with Otterbein. We have gotten a revised scope that puts it around 1.2 to 1.5 million to have a permanent low barrier shelter space that is dedicated for the city, that does not interfere with other operations of the church facility. It also provides opportunity as we look, like I mentioned before, to bring that bridge between shelter and a step up into housing. There's opportunity to provide housing units on the second floor of that building, which we've been talking to the congregation about. So again, was hoping to have formal agreements and other things established by December 1, having 80 full beds. But I think over the last 2 weeks, we've definitely seen a shift as well for the opportunity to provide additional services and beds for the winter months. So I don't want to be long-winded in what the issues are. I know it's been discussed at public meetings, it's been discussed in media, it's been discussed nationally as far as what the issues are. I think from research and discussions, this community has a leg up. Other communities are pointing fingers. Other communities are have not been addressing it like we have collaboratively. And so we are just appreciative of the opportunity to make a big impact with these ARPA funds. And I, again, wanted to provide an accountable extension of 60 days so that this thing continues to move forward at a rapid pace.
Thank you so much. I do have some questions, and I think the first question, and Councilor Walsh brought this up at our last meeting when we were planning for you to be here. Can you talk about winter shelter and Code Blue are two different things?
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit about what that means and what are the plans this year? I think it's top of mind. It's 29 degrees tonight, so
Yes.
I think that's the first thing we need to discuss.
It's close to our Code Blue criteria. And I may turn over some to Deb as well as our Director of Human Services and the Director of the Homelessness Coalition, because again, both Winter Shelter and Code Blue is a county-wide response. I just in context of this report and the 40 additional beds is Ebenezer was established as a low barrier winter shelter, but became more of a permanent 365-day because of the need. Winter shelter, again, because of the elements, there's a certain cost programming. We have various shelters that do open up December 1st. Elizabethtown has a shelter, I believe it's 38 beds opening December. I believe in January, we have additional beds opening up in Ephrata, and then Columbia is now a 365 shelter as well because of the need. So when we talked about winter shelter in the past, that meant new shelters would be opening up for the winter months to get people warm. Last year, we established the first, in my understanding, actual physical Code Blue procedure and policy, which has been shared and is shared publicly. This process is in coordination with the Emergency Management Association on calling when temperatures reach certain levels, certain criteria, to make sure the facilities are open perhaps longer periods of time, and that we look at shelter capacity. So there will be different tiers of response. Sometimes we'll have enough beds, and the response is just notifying the public that temperatures are going to reach a critical level and that the system in itself should be prepared to respond. Others may be like last year when we set up temporary beds. And so in general, the Code Blue is to make sure that we have a response and that our partners are letting us know the shelter capacity. So we have an online system that is reported live what the shelter capacity is 24, 48 hours in advance. And so generally, again, that's a public response. So Deb, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Specifically related to the RFP, I have a couple questions, just to help put everything in context. So my first question is, so we entered this agreement in April, and it looks like the RFP was released in September. Do you feel there was enough time to find an operator in that period of time? Do you believe that contributed to a lack of response?
Do you want to answer that, though?
Good evening. My name is Deb Jones. I serve as the Director of Human Services with Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I'm also a social worker and have been working in Lancaster here for over 20 years with individuals with homelessness and also with severe mental illness. Had the opportunity also to be part of the Lancaster County Homelessness Coalition as a funded partner, an agency that opened up a shelter and have some direct knowledge of the difficulties and challenges related to this type of program. So, President Bakay, to answer your question, the challenges of being able to sign an agreement in April and to secure a host agency were tremendous. As you can imagine, how difficult it would be to have an RFP out for social services and not have an idea where it would be hosted, what the facility would look like. And for an agency to step into that, it would be rather challenging to be thinking about the costs associated with providing services. So that was the main reason for the length of time, just the difficulty in trying to find a host agency to be able to have the shelter. And as you can see from the RFP that we provided to you, that we had an on-site visit. We took a tour a week after the RFP was released so that providers can come in and to see exactly what are we looking at. Because as you can think about this with emergency shelter, even the floors are important. Is this going to be a split level operation or solely on one floor? Where is the ADA accessibility? Where are the bathrooms? I mean, these are critical pieces that an agency needs to consider as they're applying for a program.
Related to that, was Otterbein the only location that was considered in that process? Or you mentioned there was several places that we were looking at. I know some of them were from the previous year, but how did we arrive at Otterbein to be the one?
Words cannot express the challenges we had and the number of site visits. And a facility would look great coming in, but then once we knew we'd be able to see the asbestos remediation that would be needed, the costs for making it ADA accessible, it was so challenging. We had a number of different churches that we looked at that had space, but yet couldn't be fitted out within a reasonable amount of time or expense. We looked at one of the 21 sites that Justin had mentioned, a number of them as we considered the neighborhood. We also looked about where it was positioned in relationship to services, making sure that people did not have to walk 2 miles or from the city limit into town for a community meal or to meet with case managers. And so the 21 sites that he had referenced are all related to looking for a additional shelter. And we were fortunate to also have city staff walk alongside in many of those sites, to be able to see firsthand what we were experiencing.
I think also to answer your question is we have a willing host, willing partner, and a lot of space. I think looking at your city now and in the future, a lot of attention needs to be on the redevelopment of churches and spaces like that, given smaller congregations, changes in membership with COVID. We saw a lot of that those were spaces that had opportunities. This is a large open space that's doesn't have conflict of other services and was not denied by the congregation or a landowner. And also we have an opportunity to have a decent affordable lease structure as well, and the opportunity to, like I said earlier, to tie housing units to it as well. And we did also look at other expansions at Ebenezer right off the bat too. So I just want to, every stone that we are trying to find, we're trying to flip over and make sure it's an appropriate fit, like Deb said, with accessibility to long-term control as well.
Speaking of Ebenezer, knowing that that's our one shelter right now, when was the Housing and Redevelopment Authority made aware of capital improvements that were needed at Ebenezer? We know that they had a boiler failure last week, but we also know outside of that, they have needs like making their facility ADA accessible, sprinklers, elevators, that sort of thing.
Correct.
When were you made aware of that, and was there ever a plan to address those needs, and where would those funds would have come from?
Yes. So we're made aware over the last couple of months. Some of the issues have been longer term that don't necessarily affect the operation, but in order to increase capacity or to make this a longer term option, will need to be upgraded, such as water and sewer. As well as there are capital projects that were occurring that have either stalled or have not been fully fulfilled. And so those we were made aware of. Were also looked at in an inspection as we looked at a potential expansion on the third floor as well, and making sure that the space was adequate. So when the boiler went down, now it's a time to reassess all those emerging needs as well.
And so was there ever a budget for capital improvements at Ebenezer as such?
I'm trying to remember, we had a rough estimate of a little over 1.1 million as far as upgrades that needed to occur on the facility, but that did not include the boiler failure.
Thank you. And I have one last question before I open up to other members of the council. The RFP stated, I believe it was $307,000 to operate this year-round shelter, this proposed year-round shelter. Do you believe that that's enough to operate a shelter year-round, including the staffing that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. And it depends on the location as well. And so gearing a little bit more towards Otterbein. I think we're not a service provider. We're a convener and conveyor of opportunities and funding and redevelopment. That was based on ongoing contracts and other budgets that we see from other providers. And so I think what we've learned from that as well is that we may need to increase that to get the adequate staffing, depending on where it's located too. As you increase beds, you increase staff. Depending on location, you might need additional security, additional lease costs, cleaning services, and so on. So I think it really ranges depending on the amount of staffing in need and increased costs of staffing as we continue to move forward.
And actually, I do have one more follow-up question.
Yes,
Is that number based on, did you pull that number from what the budget was at Ebenezer that was set, I guess, in 2020?
The budget,
Yeah.
Right. So That number was established based on the current shelters that are being operated throughout our county and the funding that is allocated to those shelter operations. Our budget for the entire homelessness response system is so minimal, at $1.5 million for all of the services throughout the county. And so we'll be the first to say that there isn't enough money to be able to meet the growing needs that we have here in Lancaster County. So that funding was directly related to providers' submissions of their budgets through a competitive process that we have for our funding annually.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open this up to questions from other members of council.
While council members are thinking about it, I just want to underscore that number. The budget for the entire system across the entire county is $1.5 million. Yeah.
That's the revised scope that you mentioned for outfitting Otterbein. So just,
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that the complexity of all of this is really apparent in terms of the limited dollars that are available, the temporary dollars that the city has to offer, the real capital needs of really any facility at this point, because we do not currently have a permanent low barrier shelter in the city and have not had one for some time, but for Ebenezer's provision of low barrier shelter services since 2020. And so we're really, I appreciate that you're calling Lancaster as ahead of other communities, because I don't really feel that, only because we have such big challenges ahead of us, just in terms of capital expenditures. And I'm raising that because the ARPA dollars and the will of council has really been particularly focused on capital improvements, because we know that these are one-time dollars. And in this case, we're also talking about operating expenditures for a 2-year period of time. And if you could just say a little bit about, when we signed this agreement in April, we really were thinking about this 2-year as a transition period in which the coalition operating under the Lancaster County Housing Redevelopment Authority would have time to develop some additional funding sources, so that ostensibly we would be creating, quote, a warm handoff into whatever we're helping to fund these 2 years would be able to continue in the future. And, I think that there's a lot of questions about that at this point, given the scope of need.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the 1.5 comes from state and federal funds, which don't have as much impact as they did 5 years ago. Those funds would make great impacts in the community, but costs of capital projects, costs of operations of everything has increased, and congressional spending has not.
correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear you, Mayor. And we have a strategic initiative to increase the funding base for services. We, as a coalition and as the Office for the Homeless Coalition, take a responsibility to help with both the strategy, the planning, and the funding of services. That is part of our responsibility, so that the providers, such as the Lancaster County Food Hub, who day in and day out are serving people in a low barrier shelter, that the onus of their funding that they seek isn't to be able to run that program. They, every year, have reduced funding from the coalition, and they have to supplement that. So our responsibility is to do just exactly what you're talking about, in a warm handoff, to be able to increase that funding source. And we have been meeting with foundations and corporations just for that purpose, because we know only how far 1.5 million can go. And we know how fast our numbers of our unsheltered community members are increasing. And that is a heavy responsibility, and one that is taken extremely seriously. And so we have shown some efforts in being able to increase some of the funding, and we're glad to be able to explain that in more detail if it's needed.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? I'm going to go right down the line. So Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for the presentation. My first question was around the pop-up shelters. As we are seeing temperatures drop, can you speak to some of the strategies about potential pop-up shelters in code blue situations? And have we identified any potential hosts for these pop-up shelters?
Yes. So actively negotiating both terms and programming for the 232 North Prince Street, and as well as looking elsewhere throughout the whole county. Again, these pop-ups don't necessarily have to occur, so we're looking at capacity throughout the whole county as well for additional needs. So I probably in a week or two will have definitive potential, but as you saw last year, we did everything we could and pulled up a 40-bed shelter in 48 hours.
And in regards to the 232 North Prince location, are we looking at possibly making that a permanent location, given some of the challenges that we're having with Ebenezer and Otterbein?
Yeah, so it is permanent in the fact that it is there through, at least through March 31st, with month to month after that, and the intent is to we'll know, that's why the 60-day extension, we'll know a little bit more as far from the property owner as well, whether or not that can be extended so that we can continue to address more permanent space throughout the city. This space was not available last winter, but it is this winter, and it has additional space that we have to work through with our providers and our partners to make sure that we can have a safe, successful expansion if need be there.
And my final question is, given this 60-day extension, when can council expect any updates on, the situation at Otterbein or when Ebenezer may be able to be reopened, and also how things are going at 232 North Prince?
Sure. I mean, we can provide ongoing reports, or we have ongoing communication with city staff. We have, I know we already have things planned to address some of these issues. So it's really up to council as how often, how much, or even just a call to our office to find out.
Thank you, and thank you, Council President. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Ahmed. Further questions from council? Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you both for the presentation and for the information. Just a point of clarification. So the $1.5 million budget, what does that necessarily cover for the entire county?
Yeah, that covers outreach, which is so important, meeting people where they are, walking alongside of them, which could take anywhere from days to months to years. Shelter operations throughout the whole county, as well as coordinated assessment through 211 and through the chart process, as well as prevention and rapid rehousing. So it's a complex with various funding sources that we also get. United Way, it's what we call our joint funding process, is in coordination many years ago between the city and county to have one funding source for applicants to address those areas of homelessness and those services.
Gotcha. And yeah, I can imagine that could be challenging and stretched pretty thin across the county. What are some of the funding sources for that, for the $1.5 million?
Yeah, so it's community development block grant funds. It's emergency solutions grant funds. It is HAP dollars, homeless assistance program funds. It's United Way funds, and then we continue to bring in and talk to other potential funding sources. And
COC funds.
Oh, and continuum of care funding, which is sometimes directly to the continuum of care, but usually contracts directly to providers. And so that's another allotment. We are a continuum of care here in Lancaster County, which is actually very beneficial. Other counties are shared or coordinated among other counties. And so at least here we have the focus of one funding source into the county.
Gotcha. So as you guys did your analysis for looking at long-term sustainability, what are some opportunities for long-term funding solutions?
Yeah, I think public-private partnerships, we've been looking at that, as well as establishing more private and donation funds as well to help balance. We do have a match requirement for all the federal sources that we have. Additionally, working alongside the city in applying for additional DCD funds. It was mentioned by President Bakay, the loss of Emergency Solutions Grant funding to the city. And so we're working alongside to try to bring other sources like DC funding to the table.
Gotcha. And then just the last question, has there been any discussion around more county investment to provide more of a coordinated effort amongst the municipalities? Understand
Yes.
that while Lancaster City might see more individuals, it is definitely a county-wide issue, and we
Yes.
can definitely anticipate more of a need in the future.
Yes, active conversations and coordination with a couple of your neighboring municipalities, townships, looking at ideas of potentially funding outreach, which would help the overall 1.5 billion, and looking at more creative solutions to address some of these needs within their communities too, so that there's not just that leverage funding here in the city, but it's leverage funding throughout every municipality.
How about at the county level?
Yeah, county level continues. Again, we are an authority that was created by county government, and actually a lot of the funds that we're talking right now are contracted through us. So we will continue the dialogue and show the need. And again, the need is across all of it. So if there's ability to deflect some funds to another municipality to help their shelter operations, which frees up funds here in the city.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Councilor Cleese.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you both of you for the presentation. I was wondering what organizations, agencies, stakeholders are involved on this project?
This specifically, or
Yes.
in the city in general?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of organizations. I mean, the continuum of care in itself, we have 54 organizations that come to the table to talk through. Not all of them are contracted partners, but in general obviously we have the ongoing shelter operations by the Food Hub. We have transitional shelters in the city, YWCA and TLC with Tenfold. As well as we have Anchor Lancaster was providing support services. We have Water Street Mission providing beds, transitional and permanent. As far as in the report, we listed a few of other agencies that we have been discussing to try to build a relationship, build capacity, or even look at partnerships within organizations that I just listed.
And how will the impact of on reducing homelessness will be evaluated?
I'm sorry.
And how will the impact on reducing homelessness will be evaluated?
Well, definitely. So every year we do a PIT count that looks at both the number of individuals in shelter and those that are unsheltered, and that helps guide us what the impact is as far as having enough housing choice and supply to meet the demand. I think that's one of our, again, it's a snapshot and it's usually underrepresented. But we continue to tweak that as well. And we'll have another one coming up here in 3 months that again will be able to gauge whether or not we're being productive in and what the need is. I mean, that helped guide us to know that we needed more beds last winter as well.
Can I just
Yeah,
speak
go
into
ahead.
that? Just speak into that one more element that I think is really important for you to know, and that is there's a county-wide case management system called Empower Lancaster. That system is where agencies put in information about clients so that clients do not have to tell their story over and over and over as they seek services by different providers. And so that system is also very helpful for us to be able to be reporting out on the individuals that are experiencing homelessness, some of the challenges that they have, including income to disabilities. And it will help us to know also how they moved forward. In Forward, we do a self-sufficiency matrix that we use in some of our programs to be able to gauge that we are moving the needle forward a bit in addressing homelessness. Prior to COVID, we were seeing some impacts with that. COVID has been really hard as we've been addressing now the current needs. but there is a system already in place, and those numbers are extremely important. They're just not numbers to us. They're helping us to evaluate what in the system needs to change, where do we need to make improvements, and how can we better help individuals in need.
And what indicators will be used to measure the success of the project? What metrics? How do you do that?
And would that be specifically for this extended shelter project that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And so positive exits are very important. Individuals who have moved out of shelter and into permanent housing or have been reunited with family members, that's a great indicator. Another indicator is length of stay in the shelter, right? It's longer now than it has been for years because of the affordable housing crisis that we're having. But we have a number of indicators that are required by funders, and we have a number of indicators that are required by best practices that are produced by our office to help to be able to gauge that we're being able to make an impact.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Kalixt. And then the line. Any further questions from council? Counselor Walsh.
Council President, thank you very much, and thank you, Deb and Justin, for coming for the presentation. I have a few questions. I think we'll just start at the top. I had a little bit of trouble walking through what is expected to occur over the next 60 days in your extension, so I'm hoping we can just take a couple steps back. The first is I want to get very clear on which project stands where and what will happen in the next 60 days, and then I want to come back to Code Blue, so don't let me forget that before I'm done here. So with Otterbein, can you tell me what has been completed to date? I have the resolution with the objectives, but what has been completed to date for Otterbein?
Sure. Otterbein, we have, I'd say, not a template, but almost executed agreement with the property owner. We have zoning approval, and we have an engaged architect that first did analysis of whether or not you could do, I'm going to butcher a chapter or something of the building code to see if you could move in. It have certain provisions to be able to set up a shelter sooner than later. Since that failed, they provided a scope, a comprehensive scope that will continue to be defined. They have already engaged engineering firms that are ready to go as well. And so part of it is fine-tuning the scope and agreements with architect and the property owner.
And when you say an almost template executed with the owner, what are the roadblocks of having that come to fruition?
Just making sure we realize the funding sources to do this, because certain funding sources have strings attached as far as covenants and other requirements to make sure that the space that we are obtaining and renovating remains a public use and has a covenant in place, so that, like I mentioned before, we're not putting Band-Aids, we're putting a long-term agreement and use in place when we're making big investments of public dollars.
Sure. So what is the total budget as of today for Otterbein?
You know, between 1,250,000 and 1.5 million. So the 1.4 in the report has been revised slightly, and that's based on about 150 per square foot cost. And again, that will be more fine-tuned as the scope continues to be tested.
Okay. And then is that inclusive of the programmatic services that will go in there, or is that simply just improvements?
Simply capital
Okay.
improvements.
And then can you tell me the budget for program services that would be going into Otterbein? So it's the 1.2 to 1.5 plus?
Right. $1,050,000.
$1,050,000 annually. And how many years is that for?
That was for actually the extended shelter of 28 months.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question for Otterbein, and forgive me because I'm going to have the same questions for Prince Street. Who is the lead for this project within the authority?
Who is the lead?
Yeah.
Myself and Department of Human Services, and as well as, not currently, but Department of Housing and Community Development.
Okay, and who has been your lead within the city?
City staff,
Yeah.
Rebecca Geyser, as well as Craig Waltz.
Okay, great. And then for Otterbein, I think my big hangup here is actually, I'm going to hold on for that one until we go through Prince. So with Prince Street, if we can move to that project, what has been done to date?
Are you talking about the temporary on Prince Street? Or at 232 North Prince Street?
Correct.
Yeah, to date, we entered into a MOU to establish the availability to be in the space through March 31st. We set up operations, cleaning service, trash service, and actively negotiating lease structure, lease amounts. We have reviewed utility costs, and that was all budgeted in the report.
And what do you expect to complete in 60 days?
In 60 days, we expect to complete realizing the exact costs as well as potential expansion at the location, and as well as potential expansion past the March 31st date to secure, given that we have obvious reporting deadlines that don't line up to each other.
And then can you remind me what the total budget for Prince Street is today?
Yeah, I believe it's 15,900 as far as monthly, as far as just having the facility available.
So you're only looking at the cost to lease the building is $15K a month?
Correct.
Okay,
And that's 12,000 square feet,
okay,
which is 3 times the space of Ebenezer.
okay. And then who was the lead at the authority for that project?
I took lead on moving the shelter to there in lease negotiations.
Okay, and then who is your lead at the city that you've been working with?
So we worked with Rebecca and Craig to make that move.
Okay, great. And then I just have a couple questions, I guess now that I have a better understanding of where both projects are and where you intend them to be in 60 days, but can you talk about what the city has contributed to the project aside from providing funding? Any on-the-ground services?
Yeah, sure. We had city staff visit a lot of the 20-some sites, as well as they're part of the steering committee discussions that talk about these issues, that we have other members of the community, different expertise that we bring these issues to help resolve. They provided support in the move last week, tremendous support, Public Works and staff, to make sure we got the beds over, as well as ongoing dialogue, ongoing coordination on submitting for additional funding sources at the state level, and again, just coordination of what the issues are. And again, since we have the contracts with the providers, just having that dialogue.
Okay. And with the project management process, I'm understanding the roadblocks that you hit with Otterbein, having the improvements completed, but then not a service provider to be able to come in. What are you doing to make sure that that doesn't happen at Prince as well?
Yeah. So currently, we do have a provider at Prince,
Okay.
and that's why non-committal on how many extra beds or exact time frame or budgeting, because those are things we have to work out with that provider.
Okay. I think those are the questions I have regarding Otterbein and Prince Street, and while I have your ear, with Code Blue, I was having trouble hearing the answer. Can you tell me what the Code Blue process will look like this year? I know last year you said you got it up in 48 hours, but is there any way that you can be a bit more proactive this year?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to talk about the policy? Yeah.
So I think the biggest misunderstanding about Code Blue is that it means there's immediate action by the homelessness response system. When EMA follows the national alerts for Code Blue and informs the providers like Veteran Affairs to Office of Aging and to a number of other providers, it's alerting us that there's going to be a drop in temperature at a certain time for a certain length of time. That immediately puts us on alert for our policy for the homelessness response system called the county's homelessness coalition. What we do is we evaluate all the variables involved. And if it is going to be like dropping within 20 degrees or lower for a period of 2 or 3 hours, we will alert the existing social service providers and let them know this is going to happen and ask them to extend their doors, open their doors, allow people to be able to come into their lobby to be warm and safe, or to open up their shelter doors if it's the timing that happens before the shelter. So we'll draw upon the strength of our already existing system for something in that situation where it's only a couple hours. If it's going to be longer than that, like a 24 hours or so, that calls for a different level of response, a more open response for individuals to be able to come out of the cold and to be able to be at a place, and that's going to be asking our shelters to expand their beds or to bring on additional people in the day center to be able to help. And then we have situations that we occurred last year, 2 situations where we actually had to have a 24-hour shelter open up. And this year, we're hoping that we'll be able to find resources to have that at 232 North Prince Street, where there'll be extra beds. Now, it depends on the walkthrough that happens tomorrow with City to be able to know if we're able to expand the beds in that location. And so we're going to draw upon the existing system to be able to expand the beds. That's the best way of utilizing the resources that we have here in Lancaster County. We have the facility, we have the room. Question is, can we do it in a safe way? And how can we support our current provider to be able to expand those services to meet those needs?
Sure. Thank you. I think just a follow-up to that is, it seems like a lot is riding on this walkthrough tomorrow. If it doesn't go well, what happens?
Well, I wouldn't say a lot is riding on that. I think there's a lot of challenging variables here. And it's all undergirded by the fact that an emergency shelter program is extremely intensive. It's intensive from the direct services that are being provided to the supervision to the administration. And I just really want to honor that. It is extremely difficult. So there are a lot of variables. Can the provider be able to expand capacity? What kind of supports do they need to be able to provide additional services? We might be thinking, add another 10 or 20 beds. It's only 10 or 20 people. It can change the entire dynamics of a one-floor shelter. I've seen it. So the provider is, they're very smart in being very careful, very cautious in thinking this through. And we want to be able to do it in the right way, providing enough supports. So we have the variables of the location, we have the variables of the funding, we have the variables about a provider. So a lot of pieces coming together. I hope that helps to explain that a little bit more.
A little bit. Thank you. Council President, that's my last question. I think I have a question for you. Are we voting on an extension this evening?
We don't have any action this evening. We have a request for extension, and that kind of takes me to my next question for both of you. That extension you requested is for 60 days, which if we count from December 1st takes us to January 30th. What I'm interested in hearing this evening are what actions are you taking to ensure that we meet that objective on that date, knowing that there's a lot of variables, things can change very rapidly, and would you be willing to come and meet with us at an interim time within those 60 days to just have this discussion again, to provide us updates about where we are at, and just want to hear from you about that.
Well, we are always available to come and talk with and to share updates. We have lives on the street. We heard that from Mr. Casarella telling us, but we know this. Our team, the whole system knows that we have people out sleeping tonight. There's a vested interest in making this happen. It should have happened a long time ago. We want to see these beds happen. We are working diligently to make them happen. We are going to try to overcome every barrier we can, and I will give a shout out to city staff in being able to help brainstorm with us. Craig Walt is constantly brainstorming, helping us to think of opportunities and ways we can overcome certain barriers. We have a vested interest in making this happen. We're going to do everything that we can to overcome those barriers. And and the invitation is always there for us to come and meet, whether it's in this format or around the conference table.
Thank you. One quick follow-up to that. In what way can members of council or the members of the public be an advocate for you in your work? You talked about your budget and all of the pieces that come together to make it, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be enough to meet the demand. What I didn't hear is exactly how much the county is directly providing to the coalition. And I think we'll find that out tomorrow when their budget becomes public. It's not yet, the proposed budget for 2024. But how can we advocate for more funding for you? Because we talked about how the county has provided, the budget that they're proposing we know is flat. We know that they have a surplus. Again, how can we advocate for your work to make this happen for our community?
Thank you for asking. It's very humbling to know that we have so many service providers working so diligently to help individuals, walking alongside of them. So we talk very frequently in our office about a call to action. First call of action is that the community has to take ownership of homelessness and individuals living unsheltered. And we see that Lancaster County is a generous community, but the needs are so great, and the need to educate needs to be stronger. We need to understand so many families are just a paycheck away. And we have landlords that are increasing rents so significantly. So we need to take, community needs to be engaged. Neighbors, businesses, municipalities, we all need to be engaged. The second is, I hinted on it, education. We must educate on the stigma around homelessness. Even trauma is such an impact with homelessness. And to realize it is not just a pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality. It is layered. And when agencies are working diligently and tirelessly, and in many cases it can take months and years to build relationships with individuals that have been traumatized by our own very system that exists. The third is an opportunity to be able to have the foundations and the businesses to be able to see how this impacts them and how helping to address the problem, the challenges, will be able to make our community stronger. And we are seeing that in many of the relationships that we have created over the last 9 to 11 months in working with businesses around Yule Plaza. People want to know how to help. We have to show them how they can help. And we have data to show that what the need is. Last thing I'm going to say is there's never enough government money to be able to address this problem. Doesn't matter if you're on the West Coast or on the East Coast. It's not going to be there. So we're Lancaster strong. We need to create ways for people to be able to know how to be a part of the solution, whether they're volunteering at a food pantry, they're giving hats and coats and hand warmers to the shelter, or they're being able to reach into their pockets to be able to make a difference, and to know that every dollar counts. So there's a call to action before us. And it isn't just pointing to this agency or that agency and say, you address the problem. It's pointing to all of us and say, how can we be part of the solution here in Lancaster, our community, and helping everyone?
Deb, thank you. And I'll add one more action item to that because I can say it and maybe you can't say it. But the county commissioners have a meeting tomorrow at 9:15 a.m. and they do so every Wednesday. It's in the morning And it's on purpose because they don't want people there asking these questions. And I know a lot of people say that we are the city and we're blaming the county, but they do not clearly put enough into this problem. And I'm saying it and you're not saying it, but there's your fourth action item, or fifth action item. We'll look forward to hearing more about your progress on your 60-day extension. Thank you very much.
Are there questions
Thank
for
you.
the community?
There is not on a report to council.
There's not? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm giving his mic.
I would just also add that there is an evening budget review that the county commissioners are offering to the public, and I don't remember what the details are. Tim?
I couldn't find it on the website, but we'll
Thank
let
you.
everyone know.
Thank you for the opportunity to be
I
here tonight.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, counselors. Our next item on our agenda is interim reports of committees of council. I do not believe we have any this evening. Is that right, Mr. Harris?
We do not.
Thank you. We'll move into our legislative agenda then this evening. The first items are Heritage Conservation District items. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Madam President. Considering the following applications and recommendations from the Historical Commission for improvements to properties within the Heritage Conservation District. First is Community Basics Incorporated, owner of 759 Manor Street, proposes construction of a new three-story residential building on a cleared parcel. The second is Eugenia and Mirica Castro, owners of 736 South Lime Street. They propose revision of previously approved plans to construct a two-story addition on the side of a three-story brick row house. And both of those applications were recommended for approval by the Historical Commission.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second on these items. Counselor Craig, do you have anything to add on these two?
I don't. They are both just as they say they are.
And recommended for approval. Any council comments on those, on the motion?
Council President, just one question.
Councilor Walsh.
If we have the answer, Community Basics is the owner of this. Do we know if that parcel that they're going to be constructing the new residential building on, is that for affordable housing?
Well,
that
the
within
community
there?
basics, I missed the very beginning of your question.
That is a project that was supported through ARPA funds for the development of the first youth shelter for children that are transitioning out of foster care in the county.
That's great. I'm really happy to see that moving along. That was my only question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Matt.
Aye.
Mr. Royo.
Aye.
Mr. Cleese.
Aye.
Ms. Craig.
Aye.
Ms. Walsh.
Aye.
And President Beke.
Aye. Our next item is ordinances for first reading. We begin with our bill number 9. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Lancaster, County of Lancaster, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, appropriating the specific sums estimated to be required for the specific purposes of the city government herein set forth during the year 2024, allowing for a severance provision, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. This is the first read of our budget, and I think that is Tina Campbell, Director Campbell. You'll be joining us this evening for this? Okay. I know that we'll take a deep dive into this at our December 9th hearing, but I wasn't sure if there was anything that you had to add to the mayor's budget address that we heard last week, and now we've had the budget in front of us now for several weeks, almost.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to add tonight. I will be doing an overview of the budget on December 4th, so next Monday, we'll be giving more of a deeper dive into it then.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. At this time, are there any council, yeah, we can still do comments. It's a first read, we get to do that. Any council comments on the bill? Councilor Ahmed.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Director Campbell. Just regarding the 2.2 million reserves that will be used in the 2024 budget, do we project that we're going to be using all of that? Or is there a hope that we'll be able to roll over some of those reserves into 2025?
Yeah, thank you. So the goal would be to use as little of that as possible for the 2024 budget. We had about that much in the 2023 budget, and we are projecting that we're not going to be using any of it for the 2023 expenses. So that would be the goal for 2024 as well. But in order to make sure that we're allowing for enough funding for the functions of the city, we needed to include that in to balance the budget.
Thank you, and I appreciate, the cuts and the difficult decisions that city staff and the directors and the mayor have made to present this budget without a property tax increase. What additional strategies and reduction of spending are we looking at in 2024 to kind of roll over this momentum into the 2024 budget? And we have a question for the mayor as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that you're going to be hearing a lot about that during budget hearings, and I would just use this as an opportunity to remind the public and remind council that they're coming up on December the 9th. We'll be beginning at 9 a.m. And each of the departments are going to be talking about not only the things that they have done this year, but also the things that they're looking ahead into the following year around efficiencies and further efforts to reduce spend. And I'll also just underscore that the major cost drivers of the city, of this budget, as they were last year, are pension costs, retiree medical benefits, and health benefits for current staff.
Thank you. And then just my last question is regarding the DSIC with the water. Do we know when we're going to get an estimated date on what the rates would be, if there is going to be an increase from the PUC?
Yes, so the DSIC, we will know that by February. And that is a process in which we are now submitting the documentation to the PUC. They will then take that documentation and they will ascribe a rate increase for the DSIC for the water charge that will then be allowed by the city for all of its water customers across the entire water distribution system. That can be no greater than 5%. We anticipate in the range of 3%, but we will not know for sure until the PUC goes through its process.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Campbell. And I look forward to the budget hearing and doing a deeper dive.
Can I just say as a reminder too, we are doing a budget overview on December 4th and then the budget hearings on December 9th, so please come to both.
Thank you. Any further council comments from the public?
Not directly on this. Is this going to be advertised so we don't come here and say we didn't follow the law?
Mr. Harris, has this been properly advertised?
It has been.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much. Any further comments from the public on this first read? All right, hearing none. Quick reminder, we'll repeat it again. We'll be doing the overview at our next committee meeting, which is the 4th of December, and then having our annual budget hearing on December 9th in this room, beginning at 9 a.m. You'll hear from every department head as they go over their budget, talking about their cost savings, their positions, any changes, that sort of thing. It is incredibly enlightening if you have any questions about the city budget. All right. Our next item also for first read is Administration Bill Number 10, 2023. Mr. Harris.
An ordinance amending the Code of the City of Lancaster, Chapter 270, Taxation, Article 4, Property and Residence Tax, Section 270.26, Levy and Rate, by fixing the tax rate at 12.64 mils on property in the City of Lancaster for general revenue purposes, allowing for a severance provision, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. This is a first read. Councilor Ahmed, do you have anything to add at this time?
I do not. Thank you, Council President. I do not. The mayor in her budget presentation at our last meeting did state that there would not be a millage rate increase in the 2024 budget.
Terrific, thank you. Any further council comments on the bill? From the public? All right, hearing none. Again, this was a first read, and this will be discussed in conjunction with all of the budget bill as well at the next two meetings. We'll now move to resolutions. Administration Resolution Number 91. Mr. Harris.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Lancaster authorizing proper officials of the City of Lancaster to donate, sell, and/or transfer to the State of New Jersey, Division of New Jersey State Police, certain personal property utilized by the Lancaster City Bureau of Police in operating the Mounted Patrol Unit, and to take such other and further action as is necessary to accomplish the purposes as set forth in this resolution.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. This is the resolution regarding the sale of property related to the Mounted Police Unit and the donation of our mounted unit horses. Chief Mendez is here this evening, and I will invite you to come up. And as you are coming up, I'll just make a quick note. It's not, we don't need to make an amendment on this, but the draft resolution that council you were provided listed only 2 of the horses. This will actually include all 3 horses. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Chief Mendez.
All right, thank you. Thank you, City Council, for having me here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight in regard to Administrative Resolution Number 91. As Council knows, it is important to assess the allocation of resources and ensure they align with the current priorities and needs of our community. While our mounted unit has been a valued community engagement tool utilized by the Bureau for over 40 years, the needs of the Bureau have changed given our current staffing challenges. The Bureau hired a lot of officers in the 90s and early 2000s. Subsequently, since 2016, more than 50 officers have retired. With another 5 expected to retire within the next few months, beginning of next year, this, as along with the decline in applicants nationwide across the country, has resulted in a staffing shortage for the Bureau. It's crucial to underscore that the Bureau's highest priority is and will remain public safety. It is not viable to continue staffing the mounted unit when it's unable to provide essential support to the patrol and criminal investigative divisions in meeting the needs of our community. Mounted officers face limitations in responding to calls for service compared to patrol officers, primarily due to the additional responsibilities of caring for the horses. This impacts their availability to attend to emergencies and high-priority incidents. In 2022, our patrol officers responded to, on average, 580 calls for service per officer, while our mounted officers averaged 43 calls per mounted officer for the year of 2022. To help immediately ease the additional stress patrol officers are experiencing and mitigate the risk of burnout, our 3 full-time mounted officers and 1 part-time mounted officer have been transferred to platoons A, B, and D, where they were needed most. After we announced the discontinuation of the mounted unit, we received an outpour of interest and enthusiasm from the public in supporting our police bureau by expressing a desire to give our horses a loving home. We are truly grateful for the support we received from the community. Our mounts are young, working-bred horses that would do best in a structured environment with experienced handlers. After a thorough vetting process, Officer Scott McDonald, who was the longest mounted member, has identified the New Jersey State Police to be the most suitable organization to take Jake, King, and Angus, providing them with the support they will need to thrive in their new homes. After careful consideration of these factors, I recommend that City Council approve the resolution for the potential sale of the mounted unit equipment and the donation of the horses to the New Jersey State Police. This decision reflects the Bureau's commitment to be responsive and efficient policing, which aligns with the needs of our community at this time. If the City Council endorses this recommendation and approves the sale, we will proceed with the necessary steps to ensure a transparent and responsible sale process, ensuring a good home for our police horses. The funds generated from the sale will be returned to the Police Foundation to help the Bureau explore and invest in new, innovative approaches to engage with residents. The use of these special funds will cohere with our commitment to continue enhancing our community policing initiatives and foster strong connections between our officers and our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Mendez. I really appreciate you reiterating the commitment of public safety in this, and I think it can be lost in this conversation. And this is obviously not a decision that we make lightly, but we do have to look at what is important to our community and where we can best utilize the resources that we have and our officers that we have. And I think those number of calls are very enlightening when we look at the way our officers are spending their time. So I thank you for doing that. I do have one question. Do we have a time frame for the transfer of the horses? If we approve this resolution this evening, when would they actually be moved? Do we know that yet? Are they ready to take them immediately?
So we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves before the vote, but it can happen as early as this week.
And I'm assuming they have other horses. They're a state police agency, so they have a number of other horses.
To my knowledge, it was a working mounted unit. And like I said, we wanted the mounted officers to be involved. They were passionate about it. They spent the most times with them. As I said earlier, like, I'm not a horse guy. So we respected their opinion a lot. They did a lot of the work into finding the proper home. And we've had, a ton of people and other agencies reached out from across the country, as far as way as Denver, Colorado, New Orleans. After speaking with Officer McDonald and mounted officers, it was clear that New Jersey State Police was the ideal choice for us.
Thank you. Council comments on the resolution? Councilor Calix.
I just have one question. It's just a curiosity. What will happen to the facilities, the barn in Longs Park, where we used to keep the horses?
That's going to be a decision, I think, for Director Campbell, as that is part of our public parks system. And so I believe that he'll be able to answer that question in a few months, once there is time to potentially reimagine what that space can be used for. But it is part of part of Longs Park and will continue to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Calix. Any further council comments? From the public?
I'm going to use a word that you Anglos use and
I'm gonna
My name is
quickly-
Ivan
thank you.
Acosta Velez. I live in Lancaster for
Thank you.
security reasons, okay? Secondly, okay, one of the things that you need to realize is that I was president of the Puerto Rican Parade. I was born in Puerto Rico. My mom moved to the States when I was 2 weeks old, okay? And this was liked by the kids. So you had 43 calls, but you don't know how many times downtown they would avoid a lot of problems, the horses being there. So there wasn't a call, but they avoided problems. Secondly, you mean the state of Pennsylvania, you can't give them to the state of Pennsylvania? State of Pennsylvania has always helped us when we had even the Ku Klux Klan. And maybe some of you don't remember, but I remember when they came here. So I wanted to know why you can't give them to the state police of Pennsylvania. Secondly, some of the stuff was donated by people. I remember doing them, they did a lot of festivals. Are we allowed by law, okay, to sell this equipment that was done by donations? Just three very important calls. You know, you did this with the motorcycles, and I heard the same story. And your call answer wasn't answered. So these questions need to be answered. Why did we not go to the state police? And the chief of police says because they found somewhere else in New Jersey that would take care of them better. That really shocks me because I've seen where the state of Pennsylvania, take care of the stuff. And I wanted to know if those three answers could be answered tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta-Velez. Chief Mendez, do we know if there was an inquiry from the Pennsylvania State Police?
Yeah, Pennsylvania State Police were not interested
Okay,
in our horses.
thank you.
So we have a good working relationship with them. We trained with them. They weren't interested.
I appreciate that. And I will say, as far as the legality of this, the sale of the items is perfectly legal to do. And we're doing this by resolution because of the amount of money that's being transferred.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the third question was. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The third one was about the community engagement and interaction.
thank you.
So actually, we do track that. So I know very well how much interaction we're having with the community in Lancaster City. So that was looked into. But again, the needs that we have as a department right now were this.
Thank you very much, Chief. Are there further comments from the public? Please come on up. I apologize, I forgot to do this last time.
Susie Gomez, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
I have a question for the chief. So how many officers do you have in total?
Ms. Gomez, if you could just address comments this way, and then the chief will be able
Well,
to
we're
address
still
your
on the same
questions.
topic, so.
Correct. You have 3
So
minutes.
how
I
many
don't want you to lose any of
officers
your
do we
time.
have in total on staff right now?
Do you have additional questions for your time?
Also, I would like to know, how many times are we going to get multiple vehicles, upgrades? How many upgrades of vehicles, of city police officer vehicles are we going to, does he have an amount? Because I see every year, if not twice a year, there's constant upgrades on city vehicles, officer vehicles. So it's like, what do you do with the ones you just purchased, and now you're purchasing new ones?
Thank you. I'll address the second question first. The vehicles are leased, and so, to my understanding, through several budgets, they run for a certain amount of mileage until the cost to service them becomes greater than the lease price, and then we lease new ones. Is that correct, Chief Mendez, in essence, for our fleet vehicles?
So they are rotated out. I believe on December 9th at the budget, we'll talk about the new lease program for the whole citywide fleet. So I think that would be more enlightening if you could.
Yeah, I know we do talk about that quite a bit at the budget
Yeah,
hearing.
but they're rotated out. I mean, our vehicles are driven 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of wear and tear on them, high mileage. So they get rotated out. There's a process for that. And, December 9th, when we talk about the fleet management, we can go in depth a little bit more with that. As for the number of officers, I believe we're currently at 112, 113.
Thank you very much, Chief Mendez. Are there any further comments from the public? Please come on up. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Kate Rowan, 24 North Shippen Street. I wanted to thank the chief for his comment. It was very appropriate and very.
They said you have to look.
I know.
Ms. Rowan,
Just
thank
wanted
you.
to look him in the eye.
I understand.
I wanted to look. Okay. So thank you. And I am concerned about, one question, it's not concerned.
Ms. Rowan, if you could just address your comments to the council, thank you.
Replacement, the horses, the comment about them being downtown when there's events is true. They were wonderful to see, and they're big, and, their presence. So how would your presence be without the horses in the downtown evening events?
Ms. Rowan, do you have anything further? Okay, thank you. Chief Mendez, could you talk a little bit about how our officers are engaging in our downtown districts with people, one-on-one, particularly our bike patrols?
Yes, so we've went back to our bike patrols, not what many people will remember, but we do have many officers out on bike. We have 5 or 6 e-bikes, which can get all over the city relatively quickly with ease. It's more interaction. I was a bike officer for a few years in the Southeast, and it was probably in 23 years my most enjoyable time here. The interactions you have with the bike, the e-bikes are a great startup. Unless it's further mounted, like I grew up in the city. I remember the parades. It's a great luxury to have. I understand that this wasn't an easy decision, but times have changed. If we have 190 officers, then yes, mounted, it's a great luxury. Policing has changed, the needs of the community have changed, so while we understand that, and you know, I respect the history of that, it was a decision that we felt we had to make.
Thank you, Chief. Any further comments from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Med?
Aye.
Mr. Arroyo?
Aye.
Mr. Cleese?
Aye.
Ms. Gregg?
Aye.
Ms. Walsh?
Aye.
And President Bege?
Aye. That concludes our legislative agenda this evening. We'll now move to our second public comment period. Again, these are open for comments about issues not already on the agenda. The duration of these comments is limited to 3 minutes per speaker per topic. Please begin with your name and block of residence for the meeting record.
My name is Ivan Acosta Velez. I live in Lancaster City. I'll start with you, and with all respect, you're not going to get it tonight because it's your family. I gave you 2 letters. You never had the courtesy of answering them because of the lead program. Gave them to you in your hands. That was 1. Ms. Welsh, thank you for all the help you've done on issues like that. And your family, you're saved. Sir, thank you for a lot of good questions you asked. Mr. Arroyo, you were born in Puerto Rico. Start acting like you were born in Puerto Rico. And I mean that, and you know what I mean. Young man, okay, the God that we have, you call him Allah, the Quran, read it, because there's things that you're doing that are not right.
Mr.
Now,
Acosta
can I
Velez,
finish?
do you have
Can I-
comments that are not personal attacks on council members and their religion?
They're not personal attacks. There's things that are happening, and if you've done it to me, and you weren't involved. Miss
You
Mayor,
can say what you'd like.
I'm going to ask you
You
something.
bring anyone
Please
to
do me the
religion.
favor.
Completely
Stop picking on me.
inappropriate.
Okay, and you know you are.
Mr.
Okay, the
Acosta Velez,
lead
you are-
program was
let us
never
stay on topic,
addressed.
please.
You can, well, you know, where was it? And do you want me to tell it to someone else that doesn't have power? You're the ones that have the power to check it, okay? And you've done personal attacks against me, and I've never come, it's not a personal attack. I gave you the letters. You didn't respond. And I'm asking you why. Why are you yelling? And Mayor, with due respect, I don't bother you. I just ask you questions. The lead thing has never been resolved.
Mr.
Fine. I'm going to be finished, but it hasn't. And I've met with you. And I talk English very well. I don't talk it with an accent. I talk it very well. Okay? So I would appreciate if that gets resolved. That's all. That's all I'm asking. And you've been involved in a lot of other things between what's going on. And we'll talk privately about them. Okay? Because I don't want to mention them here. We'll talk privately about it. And yourself, why didn't you answer me? No reason?
I don't feel the need to discuss this during this time, Mr. Acosta Velez.
Well, then you
I
never
did
send
provide
me
you
a letter.
answers.
You never send me a letter.
I
Bye.
provided
God
you
bless you.
answers.
But you know what? There's a God. What goes around comes around. Okay? Remember that.
Have a good evening.
Yeah, I won't.
Are there any further public comments this evening? Please just come on up to the podium.
Hello,
Good evening.
I'm David Reynolds from the 700 block of Fremont. I'm here for Fire Station 6 at 843 Fremont Street, Lancaster, PA. It was built in 1958. It is now 65 years old. It has 8 elementary schools, Lafayette, Price, Carter, Hamilton, in its area. It's within 2 minutes of response time to these schools. There's 2,000 plus children at these 4 elementary schools, ages 5 to 10 years old. I have 4 daycare centers in the area within 2 minutes response time and 8 churches. I was taught a lot of things, most of all, not to harm any child forever and respect your elders. Our community and neighborhood is going to be unsafe soon. I call on the people of Cabbage Hill and those who have left to come home and save Station Number 6 from being closed forever on January the 1st, 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. Are there any further public comments this evening?
Yeah, I actually signed up for a public comment, and I wasn't here earlier. Susie Gomez, 115 North Reservoir Street.
Good evening.
Good evening, guys. I just wanted to share, I don't know if City Council has compassion. I don't know if you're listening to the people. I don't know if you care, Mayor. I really don't. I mean, 5 years ago, I asked you for improvement in the park on North Reservoir Street. You promised me 2023. You don't even have a plan for 2024 for us. We're not even in the comprehensive plan. Did you think about Reservoir Street Park?
Please continue, Ms. Gomez.
Okay, you don't have to answer that.
We do have a comprehensive parks and master plan that's underway, and you are right that we are behind. Let me finish, please. You are right that we are behind. And it is true that part of the reason why we're behind is that we lost a couple of years with COVID. And that is not an excuse. That is just a statement of fact. So that comprehensive park plan, we will have a draft in early 2024. Is that correct, Mr. Kimball? Mid-2024. And the parks master plan includes Reservoir Park. Please continue.
We'll see about that. The other thing is, Deb Jones was just up here talking about, the affordable housing crisis. I don't know, Mr. Arroyo, Councilman Arroyo, if you understand the affordable housing crisis that we're dealing with in Lancaster City. I mean, you have to really, really have a conscience. Ahmad, Khalik, I don't know if you have one. Craig, Walsh, you have to have a conscience because the problem in this city is affordable housing, Mayor. And it's not affordable for the people that are coming up in numbers, homelessness. This is a result of the administration, the city, whatever you guys are doing that is not beneficial to the people that come up here and share their passion. They send you right to knows, they send you concerns, they send you emails after emails, phone calls after phone calls that are not even being responded to. Do you have compassion? Do you know what's happening? Resources. Do you know what's going to happen with Ebenezer Church? Do you have a plan? Is anyone here from Ebenezer Church that can represent?
Yes, we are working very carefully with Reverend Forbes right now to get him a new boiler. Yes, we are on it. We are trying to raise the money that church needs to be able to serve its community.
And you're also raising money for the other one.
We served over they have done an incredible job. They served over 1,000 meals on Thanksgiving Day.
For years.
I know, it's amazing.
For years.
And we are working very diligently to help them. So yes, Ms. Gomez, yes, I have received your right to know request. And I would like to tell you to read the instructions of the right to know request. Right to know requests are requests for documents. They are not an opportunity to ask questions. You have received multiple emails. There is a system that shows read receipts that tell us when an email has been opened and read. You have not opened any of your emails that have been sent to you. They clearly say Lancaster City in the message that is being sent to you. So I encourage you to read your email.
They're not going into my email.
Then you must have provided an incorrect address. I have all of the documentation.
Well,
Please
I will
call
look
my
for that.
office and let me know again what your email address is, and we will send them again. And I encourage you to read the instructions. There were no documents that are associated with many of your requests that you have sent, because they are questions.
There were documents, Mayor. I requested you from Tina Campbell. No, you still haven't answered that.
Conversation offline.
I requested documentation. She's asking a question, I'm providing it.
I understand.
She's taking up my time.
This is going a little bit outside of public comment at this point.
Anyways, there has been requests for documentation, okay? The hiring process, the resumes, the interviews, all of that should be well, where is it? That's 2 months ago.
Read your email.
Ms. Gomez,
Where is it?
would you please do me a favor and talk to Mr. Harris to provide your correct email address so that we can make sure that we
You don't
have
need
the
my correct
one?
email address. Don't belittle me, okay? I'm grown just like you, and I'm very educated.
I think we're done
Okay?
here.
No, we're
You've
not
had your
done.
time.
Okay, no, we're not done. The last thing is, you need to make sure that the resources that are pouring into our city is being used properly. There is a misuse of funds here. Okay? I'm very curious to see the whole audit.
It's public. It's on our website. Read
I'm
it.
Trust me,
Ms.
I will
Gomez,
read it.
At this point, we've gone well over your 3 minutes, so please, your final thought?
My final thought is, have compassion. There are people that are suffering in this city, from our students to our children, to the homelessness, to the churches. Okay, this community is doing a fine job providing for the community, people that are in need in our city. They're publicizing it. They're doing a great job providing food, shelter, and whatever, clothing, Thanksgiving dinners, everything we can do to pour into our city, we're doing it. What are you doing? That's the question.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Are there any further public comments this evening? Mr. Stuhldreher.
Tim Stuhldreher, One United Lancaster. It's my understanding that, Justin Eby sent you an email indicating that they're out of compliance with the plan that the city and the redevelopment authority agreed on in April. We heard the discussion this evening. They asked for a 60-day extension. I don't know if council needs to take a formal action, and under what circumstances will the $800,000 be released, and what is the status of the 60-day extension that they requested?
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Stuhldreher? Okay, thank you very much. It's my understanding that we do not have to take any formal action to actually make that extension go into effect. Mayor, do you have any additional insights on that?
No, just to say that what Justin and Deb indicated is that this is an ongoing conversation, and I think internally and with council, we will be reviewing milestones for the next 60 days and what we can anticipate, and being able to provide updates to council related to how those milestones are being met over the next 60 days. So I would say we are in regular communication with our partners at the county and the providers in our community to address both the capital needs and the operating cost needs, and continuing to support funding efforts, including joint proposals that we're submitting to meet the needs of the facilities as well as operating costs. So all of those efforts are going to continue. I think that what council heard tonight was I think we all feel very disappointed that we are not going to have a shelter opening on December the 1st. However, we continue to explore every option, and that work will continue. But I do think that we will need to have specifics about what to expect over the next 60 days.
Thank you, Mayor. Any further public comment this evening?
My name is Irene Grievous. My comment is, a few weeks back, I had requested to find out why my trash cans were disposed of, and why, when there is a criminal activity being committed, why my complaints have been ignored. President, Councilman President Bakley, you did respond to my email. However, there's no response as to why actions have not been taken care of as far as my complaint with my pavers being stolen out of my property, my trash cans being disposed of. And now we're moving to the next level where there's search warrants on a property from false allegations. Like, what rights do us citizens have when our elected officials are running this, the government under the color of law? I mean, we're speaking about homelessness, and here, my property has been condemned now for over 2 years over erroneous, debunked, false allegations that are being made that is causing homelessness to people that need housing, and yet nothing is being done. It's being covered up by our elected officials with no remedy other than keep having us going around in circles in efforts to push and force certain minorities out. So how do we address this problem when our elected officials are ignoring us and being covered up and continuing to abuse the powers that you were elected to do? How do we move forward when there is no trust, transparency, or honesty? That is my comment. Is there an answer?
The only thing I can address directly is the email exchange that we had. I had not heard back from you after I sent what I found from the police regarding the incident at the Mary Street property. Some of the things you mentioned I don't believe were related to that, and we didn't discuss trash cans, so I'm sorry, I don't know what that's regarding. But the incident with the pavers, I followed up and referred you to the magisterial district judge. I haven't heard back from you since then, so I'm not sure what else you'd like. But if you have additional questions, I'm happy to follow up again.
Yes, my question is, why would it be through the magistrate when this was a crime? If there's a crime being committed, why isn't it being followed? The police officer was unwilling to take any action. How is a criminal activity brought to a magistrate? That should be through the police department, not the magistrate.
I'll read from the email that I sent. The police officer reached out to the district attorney's office. They would have to be the one to file the charges, and they declined to do so. So because the district attorney was not going to file charges, you could go to the magisterial district judge to file a civil claim in that matter.
But why would it be a civil claim?
I'm not a legal expert, ma'am. Is there anything further that you have this evening?
When somebody takes something from someone's property, why isn't that a crime?
I can't speak for the county district attorney, ma'am.
Well, why wouldn't you? I mean, I've gone to the police and I've gone to the DA's office.
Do you have anything further, Ms. Grievous?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Are there any further public comments this evening? Hearing none, we'll close the second public comment period, and our next item on the agenda is the report of the mayor. Mayor Sirachi.
Thank you, Council President. We are going to take a very hard right turn into something that is more joyous, the holiday season. It was a delight to kick off the holiday season with the tree lighting last Friday and celebrating the arrival of Santa, which has been a tradition in the city since the 1940s. Penn Square was jam-packed with happy families, and I want to give a special recognition to our fire, police, and public works staff who did a fabulous job pulling off the event. So thank you all for your efforts. Small Business Saturday was also last weekend. It was a very good day for our local retailers. We all know the great benefit it is to our community when we shop locally, and I'm pleased that that sentiment seems to be growing each year. There are plenty more opportunities to support our retailers, artists, creatives, etc. downtown. Lancaster Shops Late is Friday, December 8th, where shops will be staying open later into the evening, and there will be a special holiday arts market in Ewell Plaza that evening as well. We also have Tuba Christmas coming up on Friday, December 1st, which is also First Friday. And then starting on December 7th, the Jewish Community Alliance of Lancaster will ceremonially light the public menorah in Penn Square each evening of Hanukkah. Light Up Southeast is also December 8th, and Santa will be making appearances on December 8th, and then will make his way to all the neighborhoods on December 9th and December 16th. For full schedule of events this season, please visit lancastercity.com/holidays. And I also would be remiss to not give a special shout out as well to the Department of Neighborhood Engagement's Office of Promotion for their efforts in ensuring that Lancaster City's holiday season is bright and that our residents, small business owners, and visitors can take full advantage. It does take a lot of planning outreach to our partners and merchants and lots of collaboration to pull these efforts off. It truly is a community effort, and I really appreciate the support of Lancaster City Council members, some of whom I saw at the tree lighting, for coming out and supporting our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sirachi. The next item on our agenda is the report of the President of Council, and I was going to mention Santa in the City specifically, so thank you for doing that. I look forward to riding with Santa every year and visiting the neighborhood and seeing people come out of their houses and be excited to see them, so that's fun. That's all the report that I have this evening. Next is council comments. Are there any council comments this evening? Hearing none and having no further items on the agenda, I will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.